But you see, remember, this is the same Yaron who says that Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, is a bigger threat to free speech than Theresa May, the Prime Minister of Britanistan. Theresa May, as Home Secretary, banned Pamela Geller from entering Britanistan. Viktor Orban just wants to stop illegal Muslims going into Hungary.
Cheers, mate. Welcome to the Bruno and Linzio podcast number 5.
Numero 5. Cheers, mate. Ciao di nuovo, bello Bruno. Apparently, alcune persone si lamentano dei nostri brevi saluti italiani. See?
Oh, some people are affected by the Italian dialogue at the beginning and they don't appreciate it. Is that what you're saying?
No, they definitely don't. Just not the thing, old boy. Well, dico loro possono andare a farsi fottere.
Oh, you want me to say what you say? Okay.
Yes, translate please.
Okay, so you're saying that they can go fuck themselves, is that correct?
Yes, what I thought I was saying was go screw yourselves, but apparently the translation went through with the unmuted intent in mind, and I'm delighted.
Yes, there shall be no beeps on this program.
So how are you this week?
Oh, I'm very good. I just got the news that Jair Bolsonaro got elected in Brazil. So that's good news. You see, nationalism is winning all over the world, even in South America.
Well, I was going to raise this with you because this is a very grave issue, and I have to put the question directly, and I very much fear that you've already answered it. But there is this rumor, this ugly, ugly rumor, to the effect that you, Bruno Turner, are a nationalist.
Oh my.
And if that's true, I shall have to report you to the Objectivist Thought Police based in Puerto Rico, and a denunciation shall be issued forthwith.
I plead guilty. Please. ARI Institute, great leaders of Objectivism, andate a farvi fottere.
Well, it's pretty much as I suspected, and I can only say I'm very relieved because I, too, am a nationalist. I want you to pull back from the camera. Back, back, back. Back you go.
Okay. You want to see the...
No, more. Or maybe you have to stand up. Oh dear, that looks suspiciously like nationalism to me.
Yes, it is indeed. A very old, vintage t-shirt from the times where the Lega, the League of Matteo Salvini, was for the separation of Italy into two. And as you know, they have reached an agreement with the southern, those Mediterraneans. And as I showed in my video, basically the country is divided in two. One are parasites. They want this, all the goodies from the government, and they are worse off than Greece in many respects. while the North voted for the League and is a civilized, advanced European country. In fact, I would submit it is, if it were to be freed from Rome, it would be probably the best country in Europe. I have little doubt about it. It would surpass Germany as well, even Switzerland.
Well, quite clearly, you're a global balkanizer, and you should be thoroughly denounced and excommunicated from all objectivist circles. But I have to say, the other day when Trump announced, it was at the Houston rally, I think, when he said, I'm a nationalist, and I was on the couch there behind me, just lolling and taking it all in and loving every second of it, but I had to get up and jump around for joy. And of course he reiterated the whole thing the next day when the press flipped out on the whole thing, and he said, I'm a nationalist proudly. But I'd like to quote two people, may I? These would be person one and person two on the subject of nationalism. This is person one. The issue of nationalism versus internationalism, which we might call globalism, right? As I pointed out in last week's column, is approaching a climax and requires a clear-cut stand. It is one of the deadliest and least defined of today's issues. Championed and propagated by liberals, in inverted commas, for many decades, internationalism, i.e. globalism, is collectivism applied to the relationships of nations. Just as domestic collectivism holds that an individual's freedom and interests must be sacrificed to the public interest, in quotes, of society, so internationalism, globalism, holds that a nation's sovereignty and interests must be sacrificed to a global community. Remember, this is person one. The United States is perhaps the only nation that has taken this doctrine seriously and is its greatest victim. Our domestic policy, we are constantly told, must be determined by our foreign policy and subordinated to the requirements of the world situation. International problems come first, domestic problems second. All right, that's person one.
That sounds like some evil conservatives. That sounds like Pat Buchanan or something. Please, let's hear the second one, maybe a voice of reason.
A globalist is a person who wants the globe to do well, frankly, not caring about our country, i.e. America, so much. And you know what? We can't have that. You know, they have a word. It's sort of become old-fashioned. It's called nationalist. And I say, really? We're not supposed to use that word? You know what I am? I'm a nationalist. Okay? I'm a nationalist. Nationalist! Nothing wrong. Use that word. Use that word. I love our country. And our country has taken second fiddle. We're giving all of our money, all of our wealth to other countries, and then they don't treat us properly. So that's person two. Person one, Ayn Rand. Person two, Donald Trump. My challenge to Yaron Brook is, please explain the difference. I can't identify one.
Ah, that sounded so tribalistic. It sounds like the next Hitler.
Oh, well, funny you should say that, but I think you've received the new textbook, the updated textbook on Americanism, which is Ayn Rand's original essay, Textbook on Americanism, with additional essays by the obleftivists, including Yaron. And that point that Trump is another Hitler is exactly one that he makes in his chapter in the book, which is the only one that I've read. So I haven't read all of the other chapters, and I haven't read the one by your Hawaiian friend, Mr. Hayashi, but I read a commentary about it on Amazon. And if that commentary is true, then Stuart Hayashi should be ashamed of himself, because he's attempted a smear job on the likes of Milo and Breitbart, which is just parroting the mantras of mindless social justice warriors. And I guess we've come to expect that from oblectivists.
But sorry, listen to let me stop you right there. That I've read that piece by Hayashi and by Aloha Boy, and it is just disgusting. It is the worst kind of smear job, because it is purposefully lying and mischaracterizing Breitbart and Milo Yiannopoulos, and he's calling them neo-Nazis, essentially. It is the most disgusting smear job I've ever seen. I mean, it is it rises to the level of what you would find on the worst kind of Huffington Post and BuzzFeed opinion pieces. I have no idea how this creature has found the courage to put his name next to that of Ayn Rand in this book. It is truly a despicable thing to see.
No, but lying evidently is their stock and trade, because listen to this from Yaron in his chapter in that book. He's talking about free speech, and he says, as early as the 1960s, Ayn Rand identified JFK's attacks, President Kennedy's attacks on the media, as real threats to free speech. One would expect that she would view President Obama's threats toward Fox News and President Trump's unprecedented attacks on numerous media organizations as major threats to free speech. Can you see the package dealing that's gone on there? Now, I don't know what Kennedy said about the media, but Obama didn't attack the press. He spied on James Rosen of Fox News. That's apart from, yes, there were a lot of attacks that Obama made on Fox News, but presidents have free speech as well. But Brook is deliberately lumping all of that in with what he calls President Trump's unprecedented attacks on numerous media organizations. That's a major threat to free speech. Trump is attacking the fake news, not the media as such, not the media qua media. He's not threatening to close anyone down. He's not taking away their right to spew the garbage that they are spewing, but he's calling them fake news. CNN sucks. Now, I know Yaron loves CNN, and he pushes the same agenda, the same globalist George Soros agenda, open borders, and so on, that CNN and MSNBC do. But for Trump to attack them for doing that is not an attack on free speech. So observe the sleight of hand that Yaron Brook is, with the same dishonesty as your Hawaiian mate, attempting to perpetrate in this book. This is a package deal. And then Yaron goes on to talk about nationalism, and he quotes an answer given by Ayn Rand in a Q&A session where she distinguished between good and bad nationalism, and he accuses Trump of practicing the bad nationalism, which is to say racist, anti-free trade. There's nothing racist that Trump has ever said. He's not anti-immigration. He's against illegal immigration. And we know that Yaron loves illegal immigrants because he employs them. And Trump is not anti-free trade. He's just saying, I'm not going to remove tariffs if the Chinese are imposing a 30% tariff or the Canadians are imposing a 300% tariff. I'm sorry, this is going to be reciprocal. And he's just successfully renegotiated the NAFTA deal. What does Yuan have to say about that, I wonder? What does Yuan have to say about the 4.2% growth economy, the lowering of taxes, the dramatic reduction in regulations that surely Ayn Rand would have thoroughly approved of? What does Yuan have to say about the fact that the military are being restored from the depleted state into which the treasonist Obama to which he deliberately consigned the military, and so on? This is a dishonesty of an enormity that we cannot begin to comprehend. And I think we need to get very serious about the fact that the Ayn Rand Institute has been taken over not just by, as you point out, non-Americans, but by un-Americans and anti-Americans. There is a very evil agenda being pushed here. And my question for you, Yuan, is this. Are you too getting funding from Soros? You may not be, but how can we tell? Because you're pushing the exact same agenda that you would be if you were getting funding from Soros.
Yes, well, it's quite something, isn't it? I've watched his latest show last night while I was doing other things, of course. I can't focus completely on an hour and a half of Yaron speaking. But it was quite revealing when he was speaking. He was asked about Germany and the AfD, the Alternative für Deutschland, and he said he would rather vote for a socialist than for the AfD because the AfD is nationalist, and nationalism is bad, and he invoked implicitly the rise of the Nazi Germany and Hitler, and unless Schopenhauer, Hegel, and all of that is expunged from the psyche of the German people, then we cannot even flirt with nationalism in the least, not even if the AfD wants to slash regulations, wants to cut welfare, and so forth. So this is the kind of mindset. This is, you know, it reminds me of Jordan Peterson. It's this scared fear. They always talk about fear, the left, because we are apparently in constant fear. But the reality is that they are in constant fear. They are in fear that the next Hitler is just behind the corner around the street, and and any rise in nationalism equals another world war. And Yaron has come out as pro-European Union. Pro-European Union.
What a surprise!
He is against, as he calls them, small little states in Europe that's so tribalist, which is of course absurd. He brought up he made this podcast. Apparently, he thinks he knows the first thing about nationalism, but he brought up Italian nationalism and German nationalism, which is of course the historical, the main rise of nationalism. That's in Italy and Germany during the unification of these two countries, which I think it was a big mistake. However, it was a mistake because it united a fractured people in both cases. And in both cases, the small city-states is what made North Italy the center of the Renaissance, the center of European civilization. The small city-states means competition between each city, not even big, fat regions. Each city competing with one another to have the best scientists, the best philosophers, and so forth at their in their city-state. They have commerce with the if Yaron is so interested in free trade, then small city-states is exactly what he should be pushing for, because when you have a small city-state, then in that case you cannot be self-sufficient. It's obvious you cannot be self-sufficient as a city-state, and that's why the small city-states in the Flanders, so the Dutch, they also were very rich and a very small country, just like North Italy, very small place. And Germany was the same thing, and you can read Goethe, what he thought about the unification of Germany, and essentially he said, right now we have many capitals in Germany. We have Frankfurt and all the cities in Germany, and all of them have their cultural centers. There's a life in every single city. Every single city is important. While in France, we see that the entire French life is in Paris, and that is it. And he was against this. He saw that the so-called fractured tribalist city-states, which is of course absurd. They were not tribal, they were city-states. Those city-states brought a diversity, if you will, of culture that you simply do not see later on. And this unification of Italy and Germany is nothing more than the unification of the European Union today. The bigger it gets, the worse it is. That is essentially the point. And the United States founders understood this. That's why the states were supposed to be independent entities. And Yaron last night ranted on about how America is not nationalist, which is this is rewriting of history. America was several colonies coming together, and the federal government was never supposed to become what it has become. Each independent, if you live in Georgia, if you live in New York, those are supposed to be independent states with a small federal government with very limited powers. It was supposed to be essentially a huge Switzerland, but that's not what we have today in the United States, of course.
Well, I think Yaron is actually rooting for an Islamic takeover of Europe, and the fact that you're now telling me that he's apparently modified his earlier position, which was, as I recall, 1.5 thumbs up for Brexit. It sounds as though he now wants Britonistan, as it has now become, to remain in the European Union. But you see, remember, this is the same Yaron who says that Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, is a bigger threat to free speech than Theresa May, the Prime Minister of Britonistan. Theresa May, as Home Secretary, banned Pamela Geller from entering Britonistan. Viktor Orban just wants to stop illegal Muslims going into Hungary. Clearly, Yaron is in favor of Muslims illegally entering Hungary. And I don't want to be thought of as indulging in hyperbole, but the seriousness of this must be confronted. That man is pursuing an evil agenda. Non-American, un-American, anti-American, anti-Western civilization. We have to confront the fact that this is what has happened to the Ayn Rand Institute and take it very, very seriously. Listen to what he said about the situation with Trump and the comparison with Hitler in his new article. This is after he praises to the skies that awful article by Onkar Ghate, as in Ghated Communities, the upleftivist from Canada, who is the best argument I know for the construction of a border, a northern border, wall. Yaron says, while America might not yet be ready for a true blood and soil nationalist, that's Hitler, the election of Trump has brought us closer than ever to that day. You want me to repeat that? While America might not yet be ready for a true blood and soil nationalist, the election of Trump has brought us closer than ever to that day. Now, he's saying that of the president who moved the United States Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. He's saying that as a Jew, supposedly. So I don't know what's going on there, other than that there's some severely diabolical agenda that they're not being honest about. While America might not yet be ready for a true blood and soil nationalist, the election of Trump has brought us closer than ever to that day. I mean, that's hysterical. He's saying that of the president who has lowered taxes, lessened regulation, boosted the military, and done all of the things that Trump has done. And while I don't pretend to speak for Ayn Rand, I'm pretty certain that she would have supported that and found incomprehensible the idea of someone who speaks in her name or who purports to speak in her name opposing that. Yet that is what we're confronted with.
Well, I think everyone should stop trying to speak in her name. I think this is a fool's errand trying to speak for Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand is no longer with us. Ayn Rand lived in another time. Ayn Rand was essentially a novelist and a philosopher. She was not well, thank goodness. I mean, she's much more than simply a political analyst. I don't think that was her strong point at all. And I think being true to the philosophy is much more important than debating what she would have thought of this specific instance here or this specific instance there. And of course, people take and throw away whatever they want from Ayn Rand. They don't like that she was conservative on social issues, or, you know, on certain issues. So those are simply expunged from the Ayn Rand corpus. But, oh, she talked badly of balkanization, so of course she would be against Trump because he's a bad little nationalist. I mean, this is incomprehensible. People need to look at reality, not at trying to
what Rand said.
Rationalistically superimpose ideas onto Rand or imagine what Rand would have thought. It doesn't matter what Rand would have thought, first because we can't know that. And second, just look at the facts. Stop being a second-hander and look at the facts for yourself. We have much more information today than Ayn Rand. She could never have imagined this. Obviously, she didn't write a single word about it. But now we are being invaded by the southern border in the United States, by the southern border in Europe.
Yes, and as I said last week, Yaron and Amy, I suppose, will be down there with their welcoming signs for this, what is it now, 15,000 dinky little savages moving up through the border. I just want to point out, though, that Yaron he's not just saying Ayn Rand would have had something to say about this. He's claiming to know. This is to your point about we shouldn't pretend to speak for Ayn Rand. I certainly don't. But he does. And there's this little example as well. There's little doubt that Rand would have much to say about the election of Donald Trump in 2016. Well, that's a fair statement. She had a lot to say about everything. But then he goes on to say, one would expect that she would view above all, I suspect that Rand would be alarmed by the rise of a particularly ugly form of collectivism, nationalism. Not the nationalism of placing the interests of one's citizens first in foreign policy, which she discussed favourably, but a nationalism that feeds off off of fear-mongering. This is Trump he's talking about, without any evidence at all, that blames foreigners for all our problems, that rejects immigration and free trade in the name of Made in America, and that places its trust not in the principles of individual rights and a constitutional system of limited government, but in a leader given unconstrained power to achieve an undefined national interest. Is there a single sentence in there that bears any relationship to what is actually going on? Placing the interests of one citizens first in foreign policy, that's exactly what Trump has talked about, which, as he says, Ayn Rand discussed favourably. Fear-mongering? What fear-mongering? Where's his evidence? Made in America? Well, yes, Made in America would be quite good after you've given all your jobs away to China, because you let them place tariffs and you don't. And there's our bell. So just as we're getting wound up, we should finish here. But I do want to stress the seriousness of what has gone on within organized objectivism, orgoism, and the need for conscientious objectivists to do something about this very quickly. I can't do anything from little old New Zealand. Probably not a lot you can do from Italy. But there are lots of objectivists who know their philosophy and must realize that this is a travesty of it. And I hope we'll make an effort to put an end to it.
I'm sorry, did you just say you want to make objectivism great again?
3, 2, 1. Moga! Make objectivism great again. Oh, there's one we have to add next time. Morpha, which is make Orwell fiction again, because Orwell, with the support of Yaron, has come to life as ever before, that is to say 1984. Orwell would hate it, but he depicted it really well, and it's never been as well embodied as it is being embodied now in communist China, with whom Yaron thinks we should trade freely and they should impose tariffs, but we shouldn't.